Entertaining, informative, and educational. Inspiring content that makes a difference.
This is the Maximus Troy Publications Broadcasting Network.
Join the Academy. The Breeders' Academy proudly presents Bred to Perfection with Kenny Troiano, a show for serious breeders.
Whether you are looking to create a new strain or simply improve an old one, you have come to the right place.
Daddy, I want more chickens.
Oh, boy.
Now, here's your host, Kenny Troiano.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bred to Perfection. My name is Kenny Troiano, and this, my friends, is the podcast devoted to helping you become a better breeder and taking your strain to the next level. That's right, my friends. It doesn't matter if you are brand new to breeding or you've been breeding for many years. There is something all of us can do to improve our fowl for future generations.
Warning, this show contains radical ideas that could be considered dangerous.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Bred to Perfection Live. I'm Kenny Troiano, and I'm here with my co-host, Frank Bradley. Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. I know the viewers is going to think that we're coordinating this T-shirt cap type deal, but I promise you we're not.
No, I told Frank, wear the shirt and the hat or you're fired, man.
It's just worked out that way. I will say the last one that we done, we did pre-plan that one, the Tree of Life.
Yeah.
We did do that one. But, man, I think the past 3 or 4 times we've ended up with the same shirt, same cap, and I promise you it's not planned out. It just happened.
No, my wife, she lays out my clothes very nice. She has them all folded for me, and she says, you wear this or else. No, I'm not kidding.
She does a good job. She does a real good job.
Yeah. No, I just actually go through my shirts, and the one that gets me, I get a certain feeling from. Okay, this is the one. I do that every day, actually. I have so many shirts, and I just start flipping through them, and I say, okay, this is the one. It just hits me. Okay, this is the one I wear today.
Depending on the mood you're in.
Yeah, it's actually how it works. Yeah, Nancy goes, twinsies. She's always yelling at me. I have too many shirts. If I see a good shirt, and especially if it's science-y type, I'm buying it, man. I'll find a place for it.
I'm in the same boat, buddy. You remember what come up when you was here, Amanda was talking about all my T-shirts. But here's the thing. She wears them as much as I do, but she still complains about them. I don't understand that.
Yeah, Tony wears my shirts too. She likes wearing my shirts. But I had a great talk with one of my members last night. He came over because I don't really sell chickens. I don't like shipping chickens or selling chickens, but I'll give them away to my members, especially when they're fairly close. If I have any extras, I'll give them away. I have no problem with that. And so he came over to get a trio because I saved a trio for him. We just had a really good talk. I can't remember what time he got here, maybe 4 o'clock. And we just talked well into the dark. It was so cold out there. I was freezing my butt off, but we had a great talk. It was fun. But we talk about this every week. I'm just amazed that I've been watching my Facebook group. That thing is just growing so much. First, it was 300 members a day. Then it went up, I think last week it was somewhere around 400. We're getting at this point between 500 and 600 members a day joining that Facebook group. It's like 4,000 members a week. I think if we keep going at this rate, we're going to have well over 100,000 people inside that groups page by the end of the year. Easy. Yeah, I don't see it even slowing down.
Now, this has been since, what was it, Kenny? When you come here to visit me, 1st of December, it started?
Mm-hmm.
Not been very long.
Yeah, sometime beginning of December, maybe early November, all of a sudden, it started taking off. It's been picking up momentum ever since. I like that one. Cody's saying, I'm glad to be an Academy member and enjoying everything you guys all do. That's the one thing that Chase was saying. He really enjoyed the Masters Class videos, but he's really excited about the members Q&A we're doing. He said it was like having us at his fingertip. But also, Chase knows he can contact me anytime, just lives down the road, and we can do a visit. So there's no problem there with him. But we can do coaching calls with our members, which is really good. And I put the Q&A together because I just thought it was a really good way to answer some small questions, little questions. Sometimes it's not worth doing a whole coaching call when you only have a quick question or something. You just want to clear something up or get an understanding about something on the website or something in breeding or something about the Founders Program. So I think they're working really good. They're excited about it.
Oh, yeah. And even with the masterclass videos, where we're letting the members set in on that sort of behind the scenes, that's like a huge coaching call in itself.
During the show, we answer some questions or we mention some comments, but at the end, it turns into a regular Q&A after the master's class videos. So it gives the members a chance to ask more questions that are not maybe associated with what we're talking about. But now we're getting right into the nuts and bolts of the Founders Program, which is really cool. Because I started looking over some of the things we're going to cover. I'm really excited to get into that. And it's changing the Founders Program because not only am I doing the videos for those things, but I'm getting in there and expanding some of the information's in there because I'm actually going through it. I'm creating the outline for the show, and then I'm improving the text that's already in there, adding some more pictures. So every time I revisit it and I work on it, like we're doing for the videos, we improve it too. So the Founders Program's changing quite a bit. And some of you will notice that every section of the Founders Program, because it's divided into different stages and phases, it's getting to where they're having their own banner. So you click on it. It's easy reference, easy navigation. You click on it, you get in there, you study what you want. If you want to just go right into the Founders Program, you're going to be able to do that here pretty soon. So I encourage you to go in there and keep an eye on it and check it out.
The others were fun. Don't get me wrong. The others were fun to do. But now we're getting into the stage to where it's actually the Founders Program at its best, but things that count.
And I can't wait. Like I said, I was looking it over. I was like, oh man, this is going to be so much fun. Make sure to join my newsletter. It's a free newsletter. If you go to www.breedersacademy.com, you'll see the tab for the newsletter. Just go in there, fill in the information. We actually call it the Breeders Bulletin. You're going to get a lot of free tips. You're going to get some free ebooks. You'll get some great information on what's going on and what's going on inside the Breeders Academy. So make sure you do that. Frank, this is going to be a really interesting and exciting. It's exciting for me. I really like the topic we're going to be talking about on prepotency and hybrid vigor. I've been trying to get this out for like months now.
Yeah.
It keeps getting pushed off, but I think it's that important.
It's just like what we've been covering. This is a necessity. You can't cover what we've been covering without covering this. They go hand in hand. And I think it'll open up a lot of people's eyes as far as breeding in general. The terms that's used for it, probably stuff they've never heard of before, but once it's explained, it's going to be one of those aha moments where the light bulb comes up over top of your head. So yeah, I've been real anxious to get this one covered.
I think they've heard of it, but they didn't really understand it or they didn't understand how it works. Before we get started, let's go ahead and take a quick break and play the advertisement and we'll get right into the topic.
This show is brought to you by the Breeders Academy, where we will help you to increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and help you to improve the quality and performance of your fowl.
As a member, I'll provide you a roadmap that you will need to create a true family or strain. Starting with a cock from one breeder and a hen from another breeder, no problem. We can help you to turn your flock of hybrid crosses or mongrels into a pure family or strain, and show you how to continually improve that strain each generation. We'll start by showing you how to select your seed fowl and how to turn that seed fowl into a high-quality foundation strain. Our proven breeding programs and specialty courses are designed to take you step by step through the breeding process. And best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel at any time. You also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Simply go to www.breedersacademy.com to sign up. Becoming a member is a simple process. You start by selecting your membership level, enter your username, password, and email address. Read and agree to the terms and conditions, then click the PayPal button. Once you have entered your payment information, you will have instant access to the website.
The Breeders Academy will not only change the way you think about breeding, but improve the way you breed your fowl. Okay, I really like the title of this particular topic, The Power of Prepotency and the Allure of Hybrid Vigor. Gives you an idea what we're going with this already. I did a poll. I've been doing this a lot lately. Whenever we're going to cover a topic, would be to do a poll on getting a feel for where everybody's at and how they feel about it, and then discuss that. So I wrote both prepotency and hybrid vigor are incredible forces of nature, but are you aware of the function of both these factors and their differences? It was interesting. Let's put it this way. I got 74 yeses since last time I checked it, 116 no's, and I got 5 that don't care. Okay. I'm always amazed by those that don't care because I'm wondering why they're following me in the first place and why they joined my groups page. But anyways, but the yeses always surprise me. And it may be because they heard of the word prepotency, has a general idea what it may be about, but I don't know if they understand the whole picture. They understand what it all entails, but it's always more no's than yeses.
That was ingenious to do. I love that because where everybody stands before we ever do the show, that's always a great thing. The understanding of the topic that we're going to be doing. That was ingenious all by itself. But I think what we're going to go over today, the viewers, the listeners, the members, has actually witnessed what we're going to be talking about. They just didn't know the term for it or what to call it. But if you've bred chickens, you've been doing both of these.
Brad's one of my members, and he's asking some really good questions. I think we're going to address every one of these. How often does prepotency occur? Hybrid vigor be proponent if the cock and hen are both proponent? If so, will prepotency override hybrid vigor and carry on? Very good question. So we're going to hopefully get to every one of these. This goes into the fun side. What was it? A couple weeks ago or so, we covered crossbreeding and everything. The most boring subject that you could ever cover for me.
That's not one of your favorites.
No, I just have no excitement about talking about that kind of stuff. But one of the recurring themes you're going to hear throughout this talk is going to be terms like homozygosity, inbred or inbreeding, purity of blood, or dominance. So try not to get too tired of those particular terms or those words because you're going to hear that quite a bit. Let's start by talking about what prepotency is. The term prepotency means the ability of the bird, which in our case is the chicken or the gamefowl, either male or female, cock or hen, to stamp their own characteristics on the offspring. Prepotency means that both parents are not exactly or necessarily equal in determining their characteristics of the offspring. One parent is going to be more superior than the other. And that's the whole idea of prepotency. That's prepotency in a nutshell, is the fact that one bird is going to have more influence on an offspring than the other. And this is not a myth. This is a real thing. This is not old wives' tales or superstitions or whatever. This is a real thing, Frank.
Yeah. We'll go back into terms. You see it a lot in hens, cocks, not so much, but everybody that's bred for any length of time has that special rooster, that special cock that anything they breed it to, he picks out what they look like. They basically look like him, traits from him. Anybody that's actually bred chickens in a lifetime has experienced this.
And you'll see that even though one side is highly deficient or has some serious problems or is maybe sometimes not as healthy or whatever, they tend to follow the prepotent bird, meaning that they look like them, they act like them, the whole bit. Like you're going to hear this a lot too, is whenever there's desirable genes, it's always the genes that we desire the most that are the most important. When they're the dominant genes, you can pretty much expect that bird is going to be the more prepotent bird. You're going to see that in the offspring. Why is prepotency important? First of all, I think prepotency for most people, and you can tell by the 5 people who didn't care, is underestimated and unappreciated. They don't see the value in this, Frank, how important this actually is.
No, and to me, one that if you've got a good bird, whether it's a hen or a cock, and they're doing this wonderful job, but you're cloning that bird for a reason or breeding that bird for a reason. And when they do what they're supposed to, it can be a beautiful thing. It makes breeding so much easier when you have, say, a dominant individual. It makes it a whole lot easier and you get so much better results from it.
It's like if you have a pre-proponent bird, like a single bird, when you can recognize it, it makes it easier to actually improve the family. When you have a prepotent family, it makes it easier to improve that family and carry it on. The more prepotent birds you have, the easier creating the family becomes. And it builds on itself too.
It's a beautiful thing in itself. I know we've all had those certain individuals, but like Kenny's talking about, it's one thing to have an individual that represents himself and his offspring or her offspring. But when you have a whole family that's doing that, it makes breeding so much more interesting and easier, as Kenny said.
A lot of people ask me is, can one family be more prepotent than the other? Hell, I've seen lines of the same family be more prepotent than the other, which can make things challenging. And then you have to find ways to work around that. We can hopefully talk about that too. So when we're looking at birds or families that are more prepotent, it means a higher quality overall. What you're going to notice is they're going to seem as a family more regal. They're going to be obviously more eye-catching. When you compare different lines or you compare different families, those prepotent families or that prepotent birds are going to be eye-catching. They're usually the healthier birds, the more active birds, and they just stand out. Are those indications that we're dealing with prepotency? Not exactly. There's things we need to do and we need to figure out, and we'll talk about those. Their growth rates tend to be better, which can be confusing because usually that's more associated with the mitochondrial DNA when we're talking about the hen. Most people, like we were talking about this a second ago, but most people, they tend to know or they've heard of prepotency, but they can't tell you why it's important or how it works. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to do that for you here. But the only thing they do know is that some birds are more effective than others. And because of that, they can't ignore it. And I hope they don't, actually.
Yeah, it's something that can happen by accident, and a lot of times it does in many yards, but it can be predicted too. You can test breed chickens to find this out. There's many ways of find these individuals, but the goal is to fill your yard with them. Start with a couple individuals and breed in a correct manner to where you end up with multiple of these birds rather than just a couple.
You hope that every line has a prepotent bird heading the line. That's the idea.
That's an ideal.
Prepotency, like we were talking about, is often misused. Sometimes it's even exaggerated. Some people will say, okay, I know my birds are prepotent because they seem more masculine, more rugged. They think those kind of things are associated with prepotency, but actually we don't see any evidence of that. And unfortunately, when we're looking at the phenotype of the bird, it doesn't actually reveal whether it's part of the genotype or whether it's part of prepotency. A lot of times those two things can be quite different. But what I will tell you is that prepotency depends mostly on the dominance and the homozygosity of the family. Unlikely that the bird would be prepotent for all characters, though, which is interesting. It's like they're more prepotent about some characters but not others. It's a tricky thing to decide on. But a bird that has a lot of prepotency has a lot of breeding power. They just seem better than the rest. And what we'll see when we breed them is that the offspring are going to resemble them more than the other parent. That's the key. That's how you know whether you got prepotency going on. So it's ability of the parent to fix his or her characteristics in the offspring, but whether or not they're prepotent in themselves will depend on whether the genes are from one parent or the other. How does prepotency benefit you, the breeder? For one thing, realize it's a significant factor in breeding, but it's going to give the bird inheritable power over the other. But the question is, which one? Because the one that's most inbred and pure is going to have the most dominant genes, has the most power.
That's the key right there, Kenny. And we say this many times. We repeat it very often in everything that we do when the subject comes up. Because like Kenny was talking about, the more pure two families are, okay, we get the question of, why don't I just crossbreed and be done with it and not have to fool with all this other pure stuff? The more your family is a family and more pure they are of trait, is the better they will make hybrid vigor when you bring them together. And that's the key. You want hybrid vigor to work. So the more pure those families are, when you bring them together, the more hybrid vigor you're going to get.
They're basically, when you look at prepotency and hybrid vigor, they seem on the surface as the same thing, but they're opposite sides of the coin, actually. One is more predictable, not predictable, but if you do it right, and we'll talk about what that entails, you can actually repeat it. Is all prepotency repeatable? No, but hybrid vigor for sure is not repeatable. You can't reproduce hybrid vigor. It's a one-time thing. And a lot of people get that mixed up. They think that if I cross them, I get more prepotency. They think that enhances it. Actually, it's quite the reverse. It's like the purer they are, the more dominant homozygous genes that you're dealing with, the more prepotent they're going to be. The only problem is, too, is like we were talking about, is it's rarely the whole bird. It's usually specific characteristics. So the more homozygous traits that are pure The more of those we can get in the bird, the more prepotent he's going to be and the more effective he's going to be. So can we get to the point where it's the whole bird, all the characteristics? If you can get to the point where all those characteristics are the same or homozygous and they're dominant and they're pure. So to me, when I look at my Maximus line, you don't see huge variations. You see very strong characters. All the hens look alike. All the roosters look alike. There's no big changes. I get a lot of good prepotency through all my breeders. I would say a small number of my breeders that are heading my lines are roosters. Most of them are hens. In some ways, I get the most prepotency. A lot of people think that, and there's some truth to it too, and we'll talk about this in a minute. A lot of people think that prepotency is more on the rooster side rather than the hen side. And there's a lot of reason to think that, and we'll get into that too.
And also selection too, Kenny. Selection by doing this, knowing what individual to pick for that specific characteristic or trait is key with this too.
Melissa's saying, so concentrating on the gene is key to prepotency. Not just the gene, the dominant genes, the ones that are homozygous pure. So understand that the purer the strain, the more well-bred they are, the more homozygous, pure, dominant those genes are, the better you are. The more prepotency you're going to see. Now, when we're talking about nicking, that's a really interesting word. When you're really thinking about crossing and you're looking at nicking, I wouldn't say when you're dealing with a purebred family, like a really good strain, we're not talking about nicking there. We're talking about building on the homozygosity of the family and strengthening the traits that they have in a way that they're uniform and consistent. When we're talking about nicking, we're talking about crossing. We're talking about two families that actually produce good offspring every time. Or a lot of times, because of the mongrelization that's going on, the only nicking we ever actually see these days is when you have one particular cock and one particular hen that produce. But the problem is when you lose one of those, you lose the nick and you just can't take that hen, add it to another cock and get the same quality that you were getting before. And the only real way to do that is to have two pure families that have a lot of homozygous dominant genes, both of them. When you cross them together, which we call recumbent reciprocal selection, we cross them together, we not only get the high quality prepotency that we're looking for, but we're getting the hybrid vigor, which creates what I think is the nick. That is the ideal way to produce hybrid crosses.
Going back on Rodney's part with the nick, and Kenny touched on this. You've got the two individuals. You're getting offspring out of them. They're just wonderful all the way around fowl. But if you lose one of those or breed it to another individual, you're never going to be able to reproduce it. It has to be those two put together in order for it to work, which the other way, it doesn't have to be that way.
One of the nice things about prepotency, we look at the effects it has on the offspring and the characteristics that they pass, because it's usually about the characteristics. But when we're looking at production and performance ability, that's a characteristic like every other characteristic. And it has a huge effect on those things. So if you want to improve production or performance ability, having parents that are prepotent is really important. And the purer they are, the better it is.
And a lot of times, a lot more predictable too. You're not playing a guessing game by making breeds, hoping it's going to turn out that way.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so great, the way I see it. It's less guesswork.
Teddy's saying, he's a member also, can a nick be improved by line breeding back to the parents of both sides? What I would say is nicking, like, it doesn't really have the effect that you think it would on a pure family when you're just doing your line breeding and your inbreeding. You're trying to lock in the genes and everything. That's not what I would call nick. And I wouldn't rely on something that would seem like a nick, because that's not how we want to create the strain. Nicking is really about the crossing of two birds that are unrelated, have contrasting characteristics, things like that. I don't like relying on nicks. I don't like the word nick, because you're relying on whether two birds work so well together that almost everything they produce is good. And that's also not prepotency. It's just short-lived. No long-lasting, long-term thing going on there. It's very short-lived, and if you're just trying to produce some good birds in a short amount of time or for a couple of years, fine. I don't think I would rely on that. I wouldn't get locked up into that.
And a lot of times, Kenny, it's an accident when it happens.
Yeah, that's true too. Most of the time.
It's a true accident, really. And I'm saying that from my past experience. Trial and error, and I found them, and once the cock was too old to breed or something happened to one of them, that was it, no more. And then it was another 4 or 5 years waiting, trying to find that special pair to put back together to do it. Yeah, I agree.
There's two ways of looking at prepotency. So if we were to take let's say a Leghorn rooster, and we're looking at the characters as far as egg production is concerned, if we were able to transmit, let's say, to only like 1 or 2 daughters, the ability to lay like 300 eggs a year, even though the rest of the daughters are like below average, we call that he represents prepotency in degrees. So if we could actually get a rooster that transmits to 50% of his daughters the ability to lay more eggs, and maybe we're only getting maybe 200 eggs per year, that's actually, and you can translate this for any breed, for any purpose that they're bred for, we say that he represents prepotency in numbers. And that's what we're looking for, especially when we're trying to create a strain or we're trying to improve a strain. We don't want to do it in degrees, we want to do it in numbers. The more breeders look for prepotency in numbers rather than prepotency in degrees. And that's the way I want you to think about it.
That's a good example.
Prepotency is also about purity of blood. This is going to be, like I said, it's going to be a reoccurring thing that we're going to be talking about here. It's brought about by narrowing the gene pool and the bloodline. So the more narrow we can make it, the better. This can occur, like Teddy was saying, through inbreeding or line breeding or any kind of pedigree selection. So the purer we can make them, the better off they're going to be. Individuals with good prepotency come always from inbred families. The more inbred and pure they are, the better. Also comes from birds that have more homozygous dominant traits. We're going to keep repeating that. I'm going to drill this in your head. And one of the reasons I want to drill this in your head, because we're not talking about crossing. It's removed from crossing. It has nothing to do with crossing. Prepotency also has a cumulative effect on the ancestry, but only when was selected for homozygosity, the purity of the blood, the purity of the trait, and when they're inbred to a fixed state.
It's just like the ancestry means so much when going into a pure family. That's the reason I'm a fanatic when I keep records, because I believe good record keeping is a big part of keeping a pure family. You need to know every ancestor of each bird and how that bird's bred. I believe that is really helpful as far as even helping you pick the characteristics that you want to instill in that bloodline. But record keeping is a big part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when you have a long ancestry, you're building on those traits. You're pretty much replicating those characteristics. And the more you do that, and the more homozygous they are, and the more pure and dominant they are, the better the prepotency. One of the things that a lot of people are afraid of is inbreeding. So I want to talk about a few reasons why inbreeding is important, because it builds prepotency. The 3 basic reasons for inbreeding for me would be to promote genetic purity and thereby increasing prepotency. Basically, you're bringing the undesirables to the surface so that you can select them and get rid of them. And then also, I like inbreeding is to not only get rid of the ones that are faulty, substandard, sick, or whatever, the kind of things that inbreeding brings up, but I'm able to pull out the standouts. And that's what I look for. A lot of people look at inbreeding as, okay, I've inbred these birds. I'm seeing some faults in some of the offspring, so the inbreeding doesn't work. Or this particular mating doesn't work. There's something wrong with the parents. And I'm saying, no, it did its job. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. Because when I put those birds together, I should expect, especially birds in the early part of the breeding, the early part of creating a strain, would be to see some very average birds, some that are really bad, that you definitely would cull, and then the handful of standouts, which are going to improve your family. So that's something I would see. Now, if I had a family that was, let's say I followed the Founders Program, I got them to the foundation stage, they're very uniform, very consistent. I would say they're very pure foundational fowl. Let's say I want to clean something up, or I actually want to do some inbreeding at that point because there's some more clean that need to do. I want to fixate some genes. I want to improve on them. So I inbreed them. At that point, you might be able to say what the other people have said, is if I see a lot of faults, then I got a problem. Okay, I shouldn't see that many faults. When I'm inbreeding at that stage, I may see a handful or small number of birds that are questionable, but the average, what we call the mean, is shorter, and the number of better birds are higher. And that's what you should see after you've gotten to the foundation stage. If you get like a trio from someone who says they have pure birds, they're the foundation of their strain, they're pure and all that kind of stuff, and you inbreed them at that point, and you see a lot of genetic diversity, a lot of problems, then you got a problem. Then they're not as true a family as you think they would be.
That's a good way to test them too. And another thing I want to say, Kenny, is a lot of people are scared of inbreeding because they think, okay, you breed a brother and sister and you get some, like Kenny was talking about, maybe a quarter of them is really bad. Defects, deformed, just the worst of the worst. Some of them's mediocre, some of them standouts, really nice birds. They think that by inbreeding them created the deformities, the defects. It brought them out, but it didn't make it. It was already in the gene pool. I think that's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to purifying a family. Breeders are afraid to go too close in breeding because they think that it makes the actual defects itself.
Yeah, there's some serious misconceptions when it comes to inbreeding, and it's such a great tool. There's so many things you can do with it. You just don't want to do it haphazardly. Know what to expect. Teddy's saying the same breed, just different lines, for example, crossing the red line over the green line. That's not the kind of crossing we're talking about. You're talking about a family. Basically, you have a family with multiple lines, what we call subfamilies. Mm-hmm. That's completely different. They're part of the same family. They still share a lot of the same genes and stuff like that. If you've got separate family lines from a foundation line like that, and you're seeing that much genetic diversity between the lines, you got a problem. They shouldn't be that far off. Whatever differences there are between family lines should be very subtle, really.
Regardless, really, what type mating you're making, even from a distant relative, you're still going to get culls. You're still going to get problem chickens. Even in a already made family, there are going to be less of birds in those matings that you're going to cull and do away with. You're not going to get to the point to where, say, for instance, you do a whole year's mating and just say, oh, all of them's just terrific. I didn't have to cull a bird. That seldom happens unless you're doing a handful.
If you go through like the Founders Program, you get to the foundation stage and you're pretty much running a preservation program at that time. Yeah, I could see it lessening quite a bit, but always expect to have some culls.
Yeah.
Michael's one of our members. He says, I have to agree with Kenny and Frank that those first steps in inbreeding where many faults are showing up is the place where the novice runs away because they don't understand how that all works. And they think that those little bad signs or whatever they're seeing they went the wrong direction. And there's just so many misconceptions. There's so much wrong information being passed about inbreeding that's just crazy. Some people out there think they're teaching chickens just need to keep their mouth shut because they're messing people up more than they're helping. Michael says also the Breeders' Academy gave me the courage to really push through, and the process is amazing. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to challenge your thoughts. The Founders Program is going to challenge the way you've been thinking all this time because there's some breeding programs out there that people are following that are just so faulty. They just don't get you where you want to go. So this is going to challenge your thinking just a little bit. It's going to make you think, oh, wow, I've never done that before. I've never done this before this and this after this and things like that. I don't want to say what they all are. But when you look at them carefully and you see how it's all laid out, you're going to go, oh, my God, why didn't I think of that? This is amazing. I can see why you went from here to here and why you went to here to there and what it does. And not only that, I explain it really well. And if you have a problem, we can get together. You can get together with me or Frank, and we can discuss it and help you out with it.
Or both.
Yeah, both at the same time because we really enjoy those.
Yeah.
And now we're doing the Master's Class video series for the members, and we're starting actually with the Founders Program, which I'm really happy about. But we're going to explain those in that too.
And too, Kenny, just for the listeners out there, everything we teach in there is science-based. That's the other thing. It's not wives' tales. It's not somebody come up with it in the 1930s and it worked, but they can't explain it. Everything that's in there can be looked up and proved by science. That's the great part of it.
And don't be afraid of that word science. I really do a good job of explaining it in a way that everybody can understand it. I simplify it. I take the science and I show you in common sense terms how it works and why it works the way it does. I don't use big words, and if I do, I explain that word. You won't get lost, okay? And if you do, like I said, you can get a hold of Frank and I, and we can help you walk through it. I never want my members to feel lost or frustrated in any way. And then here's the other thing too, is the members, they said that, and I hear this a lot, they sign up, they get into the Breeders' Academy, and there's just so much there to get overwhelmed. They just like freak out like, oh my God, there's so much information in here. I fix that too. You go in there, I have start buttons all over the place. You click on that start button, you follow the programs and courses that I give you in the order that I give you them, and you're going to be a pro in no time. Okay. And again, you can get together with us and we can walk you through it if you still need us to do it. But I look for every way to simplify that website. And I was asking Chase last night. So I know there's a lot of information in there. I know it can be overwhelming. What do? You want me to take information out and keep putting it in? Because we're adding information in there every week. He goes, no, you did it perfect. It's an awesome website. And those start buttons really make the difference.
Even if you don't understand it, we're here to help you in any way that you need it. And you've got from step one, your fowl you're going to start with, your Adam and Eve, if you're making your own strain, and it's got step by step all the way through to it. We're here to help you. And even if you've got a family that you purified over the years and you want to improve them, you can even use the same steps. You start at a different place, but you can even use that to start out with. But like we're always saying, Kenny, even if you've had a family for so many years, say 30 years, I think the Founders Program's awesome to even run them through just to clean them up.
Yeah, it's like the trio I gave Chase last night. I said, don't be afraid to use the Founders Program from day one. Even though this is an established family, I told him, you literally could take these 3 birds I've given you, breed them together, and create 3 separate lines right off the bat, and you can go right into it. But don't be afraid if you feel like it. Start right from the beginning with them. It won't hurt you one little bit. Teddy's saying, I think they're afraid of what they'll find out.
That's true. Really, I think a lot of that is true, though. I really do.
Do they want to learn or not want to learn? Or do they like following the advice that they've been given a long time ago? Do they think it's easier? Are they getting the results they are looking for? I think they're going to see huge changes if they follow the Founders Program.
I do too. And I just want to recommend something to the listeners out there that's afraid of inbreeding. Okay. Don't be worried about this because it's simple. It's effective. If you want to try it, don't do it to your main line. Take a subline off to the side. Okay. Experiment. Join the Breeders' Academy, take them through the Founders Program, and just go from step 1 to the end of it. Seeing's believing. That way, no harm, no foul. You've not heard anything. It's a subline. If it doesn't turn out right, you've got it. You can get rid of it. You still got your foul. But I'd recommend that to anyone that is skeptic about the inbreeding part or doing the Founders Program, is actually just test it and see. And I'm telling you, seeing's believing.
Yeah. Popcorn Sutton says, much love to everyone here. We're all sharing the same goals. That's the way I see it. This is fun for us. We're all just having a good time talking about chickens and breeding. And that's what I like about this show. And it's what I like about the Breeders' Academy and talking with my members as well. Prepotency, if you look at it, you got to put this in the proper frame of mind, but prepotency at a genetic standpoint, it just spells homozygosity, the purity, the dominance of the gene, the inbreeding of the family. When you look at prepotency, it really depends on that. It depends on the traits being homozygous and that the fact that, like Melissa was saying, it was all about the genes, but it's about the dominant genes. Just understand that part, okay? The more homozygous dominant genes you have, because they could be heterozygous, meaning that they're not pure, they have 2 copies of that gene, we want to stay away from that. So homozygosity, it's caused by inbreeding. The more dominant genes or pairs, the more prepotent. The bird that possesses the higher degree of homozygosity will produce germ cells that are more uniform in genetic constitution. So basically, when we talk about germ cells, we're talking about the gametes, which is the sperm and the egg. And when they're put together, they create the zygote. And the whole idea is getting parents to share as many of the traits, the characteristics as possible, and to share traits that are homozygous pure. That way we're going to get the more prepotency. Now, here's an interesting thing I just thought about is a lot of people say, can prepotency be passed from generation to generation? Let's say the cock has a lot of dominant homozygous traits that are pure, and he's the proponent parent. But the hen has so many contrasting characteristics. She just doesn't share the same traits, the same characteristics as the rooster. Then it'll show up and you'll produce really good offspring, but it won't be passed generation to generation. To get it to pass from generation to generation, you got to find a hen that is matched very well with the rooster. Meaning, again, we're talking about characteristics that are homozygous dominant. Then you're going to see that prepotency work in such a way that it's passed from generation to generation. So it really depends on having both parents being good.
That always helps. And also with the inbreeding too, Kenny, it's going to improve the prepotency in a way, it's going to make it better. So much better.
I'm hoping what we're saying here is going to help maybe even improve, maybe get more people to start looking at inbreeding different. Maybe more people will start inbreeding. Maybe people will start getting more into creating their own strain instead of crossbreeding, because prepotency, when it's working, it's the best thing ever.
It's awesome.
It's a whole lot better than hybrid vigor, I'm telling you.
And it's there to stay. If you select and you breed right, it's there to stay, where the hybrid vigor is just one time. After that, you have to keep recreating them year after year. With prepotency, you're creating them, but you don't have to look and try to find that nick with that special cock and that special hen.
Ways of predicting prepotency is, and this is really the only way to do it, is like, let's say you have a cock that you think is prepotent, and you've bred a lot of offspring, it's like the larger the population of offspring that he produces, the better of what they call the index you're going to get, the better indication. If you see that he's produced a lot of offspring and they're all really good and they all resemble him, then you can say, okay, this rooster has really good prepotency. That's the best way to judge it. Hard to judge a rooster if he's prepotent or not when you're just hatching a handful of chicks. You really don't know. Okay.
It's like me, Kenny. I've got 2 cocks in particular, 2 different families. It doesn't matter over the years what I bred them to. The fowl always come back looking to them. They recreate themselves pretty much. I've test mated them just to see. I wonder if he would do it on this hen and breed him on that hen, and they all come out representing him. They look, they act in every way, just like those 2 cocks.
One person was saying to me that it's one of those things where the prepotency is passed from the rooster, because a lot of people think it's about the rooster. And a lot of times it tends to be, for some reason. It tends to be more of a sire thing than a dam thing. No matter what the animal, too. It could be chickens, it could be cattle and everything. Prepotency seems to be stronger in the males for some reason. And they think that this is something that's usually passed from father to son. The way mitochondrial is passed from daughter to daughter, it's not passed from father to son. The only way it's going to be passed on and on like that from father to son, something like that, or father to offspring, actually, what's really happening here is like what we were talking about a second ago. When you got a prepotent father and he's married to a hen that carries the same dominant genes that he's carrying, okay, you're going to see that not only in the sons, but you're going to see that in the hens as well, or the pullets. And they're all going to be homozygous dominant for those particular genes. They're going to match the hen and the rooster really well. And then if you do that properly and you're selecting them properly, it can be passed generation to generation, something that hybrid vigor can't.
Really, it's a have to have success with a family, a fowl. It really is. It's very important.
So let's dive into this just a little bit more. Who's more proponent, the mother or the father? And like I said, a lot of people think that it's more of a father thing than a female or a mother thing. And it tends to be this way. And it could be because that the traits are easily selected in the rooster. We can see them easier in the rooster. We know a lot of times because they're so sexually dimorphic when you're comparing the rooster to the hen, whether those traits are going to be dominant, recessive. So we tend to lean towards the rooster, or maybe we're selecting them in that way that the rooster does carry more of the homozygous dominant traits. So he tends to be, a lot of times, the proponent parent rather than the hen. But like I said, if we could select the hen better, then we get such a prepotency that it can be passed generation to generation. But we tend to separate them, that we look at the cock as a proponent one, and then we look at the hen as the one carrying the mitochondrial DNA, which has a lot to do with the growth and development of the offspring, how well they mature, their health, and their resistance to disease. If it did work like that completely, that would be a really good combination. You select for the rooster for prepotency, you select for the hen for the good mitochondrial DNA. Voila, you have one hell of a strain. Her mitochondrial DNA, we can't excuse it. And I can't wait to actually cover that one someday, because it's one of my favorite topics, and it's so important that her mitochondrial DNA, and especially if she was proponent, would be a huge contribution to the strain. So I think it's one of the reasons why I use hens to head my lines a lot of times.
Yeah, this is really close to the conversation that we had in my kitchen when you was here, Kenny. And we actually done an episode on it. That's really how it started out, the same conversation.
I want to push on this a little bit more too, that it's more about the purity of the characteristics and traits. In a lot of ways, it's not about the family, but it's the characteristics and traits that the family carries, okay, rather than the individual. If the individual's homozygous for the dominant traits, and we can build on that with the hens, then that builds up on the family, and then the family gets better. So what we want to look at whenever we're breeding and we're examining birds, and you can tell by the phenotype of what they carry. The genotype sometimes is hidden, but these are very phenotypic. We can look at them, we can tell what they got. A lot of times we can see what traits are dominant, which are recessive, which the only time we can tell whether they're impure, heterozygous, and they carry contrasting characteristics or whatever, is if we breed them, we look at the offspring. But we just want to carry on with individuals. Like if we took a trait and we say, okay, if it's pure, it carries 2 capital A's. That would be the dominant side. If it's pure and it's recessive, then we're looking at lower A. Okay, anything that's heterozygous is going to have a capital A, lower A. Even if we do like a Punnett square and we see that, we want to avoid that. We want to stay away from those kind of things. Otherwise, we're going to destroy prepotency. Prepotency depends primarily upon the bird being homozygous for numerous dominant genes. Okay, I want to make that clear. Prepotency, this is a good one. Prepotency and its connection between variation. The more prepotent the individual is, the less probability of variation, good or bad. Usually when you're seeing a lot of variation, a lot of times there's a lot of genetic diversity, probably the product of a cross or maybe they're mongrels. That just destroys. So whenever you're seeing large variation, if you're breeding your family and you're breeding them true and you're selectively breeding them to a point when they're uniform consistent, you're not going to see the variation in that family. So if we see less variation, we're going to see a higher rate of prepotency.
And two, Kenny, if someone goes out and they buy a pair, buy a trio, that's the very first breeding is when you're going to find out if that's a family or not, if they've been purified, because you're going to see it in the offspring. That's the true lie detector, I think.
Yeah, breed them. Get your trio, whatever. Breed them. Look at the offspring. Offspring is going to tell you everything you need to know about them. It's going to tell you how pure they are, how much variation, how much genetic diversity. If we can lower the potential of variation, let's say we purposely buy a family that has a low potential variation, or whether we get a cock and hen, we breed them together, and little by little we selectively breed them and cull them in a way that we're seeing less potential for variation. I mean, I'm telling you, that's a recipe for great prepotency throughout the family. And if you can get the birds that are heading your lines, because you want to have multiple lines, to have good prepotency, you're going to go a long way. It's going to do wonders. Because of the mongrelization that's going on, a lot of the crossing, a lot of people ask me if I buy a bird from a well-known breeder, is there a good chance they're not going to have that prepotency? And I'm going to say, yeah, because of the mongrelization and the crossing and the huge variations that show up, I would expect that the prepotency isn't going to be there like you would hope it would be. That's something you may have to create on your own.
You've won the lottery if it has.
That's true, too.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
You've won the lottery.
Okay, so do all birds pass their prepotency to their offspring? And no, it could have a lot to do with what we just talked about, the huge variation, the mongrelization, the crossing. So it's not expected. It's not automatic. Basically, what I'm saying here is whenever you buy birds from a breeder, you take a lot of risks. You just don't know. And sometimes it is better to find the best cock you can find from one person and then find a hen that matches it, maybe sometimes from another person, and then start from there and then you build on it. There's some questions we should be asking a breeder or even maybe asking ourselves when we're going to buy birds. I wrote a list here. I want to make sure I got them all. So ask, are they pure? Are they a pure family? And I'm hoping you get the right answers. I'm hoping they're truthful, okay? Will they select it for purity of characters and traits? Not just as a family, but are the traits that they select for are pure? Are they looking for homozygosity? Okay, are they looking for the dominant side? Do we see any variation amongst the family? Okay, so if we're looking in their yard and we're looking at all their birds and they have variation, they say it's a pure family, but they carry different comb types. Some have different color legs, or they get different colors of feather, things like that, or different sizes. Are you seeing any variation? That's something I would call a red flag. Do the hens match the cocks? A lot of people, they don't really understand what hens really match the cocks, because you get that and they don't match the cocks. Not only are you going to have to clean that up, but chances are you're not going to see the prepotency that you're looking for. Do we see genetic diversity? Goes back with the variation, actually. Are they healthy? Because if they're not healthy, I can guarantee you, if they're not healthy, even though they're carrying the dominant homozygous traits that we're looking for, if they're not healthy, they're going to pass more of that unhealthiness to the offspring than they would the traits that you want to get from the cock.
Okay, just say, for instance, they're not healthy. Their health's terrible. They have everything else. They're a perfect bird. You're still not going to succeed with them. Sickness is sickness. Sickness is a weakness, the biggest weakness. If a chicken's sick, that's the deal breaker right there. I'm
oh, yeah. If I go on a farm, or if I see a video of a farm, or I see someone talking about their birds, and they're obviously reliant on medications and vaccinations, I'm running, man. There's a problem there. I wouldn't want a family that has that many weaknesses, and I wouldn't want things that are going to cover those weaknesses, because when I get them and I breed them, they're going to show those sicknesses, and then I'm going to have to select them in a way to bring them back to health without the medications. And that could be most of the birds that I produce there for a while. So yeah, I would always be wary of anybody who says they rely on medications or vaccinations.
If a bird's sick or shows any type of sickness, I will never, ever breed that bird, ever.
That's right.
Ever.
Not even on my own yard. As soon as I see a sickness, which I haven't in a long time, I will eliminate that bird so fast. Jason's saying, and he's a member too, so prepotency is the most important mechanism used in breeding. It's right up there with good health.
I said blending.
Blending?
I don't know what he meant.
Oh, blending.
Yeah. He may have meant breeding.
Oh, blending. Important mechanism used in blending. What do you think? Assume he said blending. To me, that's crossing, right?
Yeah, blending would be cross.
It'll go back to what we were saying earlier. And this is more than what most people want to do. If they're really trying to breed a really good hybrid cross, and it takes two good families to do it. So that means you're going to have two families that are pure. They're homozygous for the traits that they carry. So if you're doing that properly, not only are you maybe taking more advantage of the prepotency that's there, but you're going to be taking advantage of the hybrid vigor that comes along with it. I wonder if that's what he's talking about. Yeah, he says blending. To me, that's crossing or infusion or something like that. Let's put it this way. If the parent is pure, he's got the genes, they're homozygous dominant, he's going to have the prepotency. It's going to show up in the offspring, but that dies right there. Okay, because once his offspring are crossed, there's no bigger killer to prepotency than crossing or mongrelization.
Or back crossing.
Back crossing is just as bad. A lot of people don't realize that. Back crossing, it can be an important part of a breeding program, and it has its function, but it really does destroy prepotency. Yeah, good point.
It's a good tool, but that's all it really is, a tool, I think.
Yeah, Jasonson is infusing. If the bird's heading the infusion is a pure bird, and you're breeding it in line with its offspring, he's going to pass that prepotency to his offspring, but it doesn't get passed from the offspring on. That's the key.
You go back to the template that you always use, Kenny, on the first hybrid vigor, 120%, and then it starts downfalling from there. I don't think we covered that, did we? Don't you think that's where it would need to go, what he's talking about? The first cross be 120%, and then downgrade from there?
It would be the parent stock, which would be that have the possibility of prepotency. We'll talk about that in a second. I don't want to jump the gun because that's important too, because we're going to hopefully get into hybrid vigor too. Hopefully that answered Jason's question. Tony says, are recessives like straight comb, green leg, reds now dominant in prepotency? The ones that are dominant, you have dominant recessive, whenever they're homozygous dominant, they tend to be more prepotent. Can they carry recessive genes to be prepotent? Yeah, because the idea is not prepotency mean the proponent against everything. Are they proponent to the bird that they're being bred to? So that's how you measure the prepotency. So prepotency, I think if you have a homozygous dominant trait, if he's carrying those and they're pure, then he's going to be more proponent than if he's bred to something that's recessive. If he's the recessive one carrying the pure homozygous traits in the recessive, it really depends on the hen that he's being bred to. So if she has a lot of deficiencies and faults, he's obviously going to be more proponent. So that's a tricky one.
It really depends on the state of the hen.
Yeah.
It all matters. Yeah, I agree.
How do we improve prepotency? Basically, improvements made when we're creating a strain. It's the natural process, okay? So the more inbred they are, the better. The more homozygous dominant they are, the better. Okay, those are your measuring sticks. Your breeding and selection practices can improve prepotency as well. So you want to select birds with less genetic diversity, select birds with good uniformity and consistency, select for good vigor and good health, select for age, making sure that they're the proper age. You don't want them too young or too old. That can play a factor on prepotency as well. Good nutrition. Now, nutrition, I'm getting a lot of questions about this lately. Everybody's got this idea that nutrition's fix things, or it changes the genes, or it can improve the family. The genes are genes. Okay, if you look at nutrition as just one leg of a three-legged stool, when we're looking at the epigenetics, the environment, things like that. Okay, so it's only one leg. It has a very specific purpose and a very important purpose. But what it does when you provide good nutrition, it allows the bird that's being raised to express its full potential so that you can select them properly. It's all about the selection. So if you can select them better, the better you are. If you're feeding them poorly, your selection points are going to be off because the birds are going to express themselves in a different way, and then you're not going to be able to compare them properly. So if you're feeding all your birds the proper nutrition, they're all showing their potential, whatever that may be, then you're able to select the one that's better over the other. That's where nutrition comes in. So when you look at it like that, nutrition has a factor when it comes to selecting birds that are more proponent. It doesn't improve their prepotency, but it shows you their full potential so that you can select them better. Another way to improve prepotency is what we were talking about a second ago, is by improving the way, the three-legged stool we're talking about, the epigenetics. So we're looking at the environment, the way they're managed, the health and vigor and nutrition of the bird that you're providing, and the genetic inheritance and their ancestry. So the genes that you select from the available gene pool that come from their ancestry. The better the ancestry, the better the genetics. So many confuse prepotency with hybrid vigor. They seem to be similar. They actually, especially when we're looking at the initial results, but they're very different when you think about the function and the future results, the results that we're getting. One is short-lived and can't be reproduced. The other one, if we do things right, like we said, by selecting the right cock and hen that match each other properly, it can be long-lasting and repeatable. Obviously, hybrid vigor is short-lived and prepotency can be long-lived. The purity of blood is better than hybrid crosses. So let's talk about why crossbreeding is so popular. You want to head that, Frank?
Here's how I look at it, Kenny. Without having the peer families, we can't have the maximum hybrid vigor. The crosses is not going to work. I see you can't have really the maximum in hybrid vigor if you don't have the purity. That's just how I look at it. Yeah, people says, why do all this work? Why make it so much harder? Hybrid vigor is only going to take you so far. Purity of blood is forever. That's how I look at it.
I agree. I think crossbreeding seems to be so popular is because people are getting quicker results. Okay. I think they're a little lazy, actually.
That's it.
And then they get that instant gratification. But nothing's lasting. Nothing's true. They're always having to add new blood to get the results they're looking for. So I think there's a false delusion there when it comes to crossbreeding. The other question would be, why is inbreeding, or let's say creating a strain, so unpopular? Okay, we're almost looking at the same things on the opposite side of the coin. Too much work. Again, they're lazy. And in their mind, it's hard to achieve. They think they're never going to get there.
A lot do quit before they ever get there. First starts of it, they quit.
Yeah, and they don't understand it too, that not every cross is going to give them the hybrid vigor they're looking for. And they can't reproduce it. So I actually think they're spinning their wheels. The problem with crossbreeding is you're not going to get the prepotency that you were looking for from the father, especially, because they're going to be highly heterozygous. They're going to have some contrasting characteristics, a lot of variation. So what is hybrid vigor? Let's get into that. We're going to bypass the rest of prepotency at this time, and we're going to move into hybrid vigor because I really did want to compare them. So hybrid vigor, another word for it would be heterosis. Basically what we're talking about is we're looking at you're putting parents together and you're getting offspring that are better than them. So we're getting that hybrid vigor that's expressed in the offspring. And this is from crossing everything. It doesn't matter whether it's the strains or whether it's the breed or different varieties we're looking at, or different species sometimes even.
One thing I want to say on that, Kenny, if I can.
Hmm?
You talked about this. When I took two families that I had and put them together and made my own strain. And I was telling Kenny this. I'd had both of them for a very long time. I'd worked a lot of the defects, the impurities and stuff out of them. When I put those birds together, and I think Kenny will remember me saying this, I was just amazed at the offspring that I got out because there was barely anything to cull left there. So I look at it as I'm making a family out of this, the reason I put them together. But that just shows you how important purity of blood can be. Now, if I'd have took two crosses and put them together, they would have looked different. They'd have been different sizes. They would have been multiple defects. They could have been even brought sickness into the ballpark. There's so many different things that could happen when you're just crossing chicken, and bad things.
Yeah. What's a fun, interesting point that a lot of people don't know is that when you look at hybrid vigor, it's not inheritable. When you look at inbreeding depression, it's not inheritable. They don't realize that those things can be fixed very easily. So let's say you're breeding a family. No, I don't want to go into that. That's going a little too deep.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I'm going down the wrong road there.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem with doing the Master's Class video series. We can go into those kind of things. So we'll save that for the Master's Class videos because I could, that would have been a good one. I got excited there.
It would have been, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Too close.
Let me address, yeah, that was close there, huh? And this kind of goes with what this guy was saying too. Okay, you don't want to give the store away, which I almost did. How do you clone without backcrossing? Now, I will talk about this. That's the problem here. Backcrossing has a function. It's like a tool similar to inbreeding, and it has a very important function, but it's something we use somewhere near the beginning of the Founders Program for a specific purpose. You cannot create a family from backcrossing. Okay?
No.
You're not setting a foundation. Backcrossing is completely different than some of the other breeding methods that actually purify the blood. So I will say that. And I think Shaggy is a member, so get a hold of me inside the Breeders Academy and we can talk about it.
A lot of people get line breeding and back crossing totally confused. They think it's either one or back crossing is line breeding. So it's really mistaken. Back crossing is, and it's totally not used right.
Okay, you can't replace inbreeding with backcrossing.
No.
You can't switch them. But you can't look at inbreeding or line breeding actually as the whole breeding program. There's a lot that needs to happen before you ever start line breeding.
And a lot after.
Yeah, and a lot after, and to continue it. Otherwise, if you don't do the things properly after you do line breeding, then you're going to screw it all up. You're going to mess it all up, and you did it for nothing. Line breeding is important, but there's misconception of how to use it properly. So if we want to measure, let's say, hybrid vigor, it's a very simple thing. Let me see if I can pull this up, because I pulled up some equations.
That's a good idea.
If you were to take this apart and do the equations, basically what we're looking at is we're taking the average of the performance of the crossbreds, and we're comparing them to the average performance of the purebred parent lines. But when you look at all this, I wanted to bring this up because everybody relies on hybrid vigor, but I've seen some really good results from families that are actually pure. They don't need to do the hybrid vigor they're thinking about. And if you look at the Founders Program, the way it's set up, there's some natural hybrid vigor taking place at certain stages of that program that you could get without having to cross actually birds that are unrelated. So we can get around that.
And too, Kenny, how many times have you heard this scenario? My brood fowl are small, tiny, they're real inbred, they're really small, but when I cross them together, then I get the big, nice, full hybrid. It doesn't have to be that way, guys. I promise you, your birds doesn't have to be inbred to be little, small, bantam. It doesn't have to be that way. That's a selection problem. Okay. It's totally selection, the size of it. You can take a pure bird and make him look just like a hybrid cross if you select right. Promise.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of that. You don't need to do that to get the results you're looking for. A pure family will create that completely. And we show you how to do that in the Founders Program. Now, if we look at hybrid vigor, and this is a good example. I know it's not chickens, but hybrid vigor works for all animals, plants, chickens, you name it, okay? You take the genes from one stalk of corn, you breed it to the other stock, you put them together, and you get that hybrid vigor. And this is what you're getting. The commercial corn that you're seeing, that you're eating, comes from parents that look like what you're seeing on the left and the right, which produces the ones we're eating in the stores. Now, if you were to take the kernels of corns here and mix them together, what we call breeding together, they wouldn't reproduce themselves. We'd get all size, shapes, and qualities of corn from that. They wouldn't be able to reproduce themselves. And that's the same thing with our chickens, actually. They can't reproduce themselves, so I don't know why we keep trying. So how does hybrid vigor work? Now, I could go into all the scientific part of it, but I'm going to simplify it for you as quick as I can because we're near the end of it. So basically what you do is you take the parent stock, the parental stock, which we call the P1. Let's say they represent 100%, whatever their abilities are, they set the standard, and we're going to call that the 100% mark. Okay, that's 100% of their potential as it stands. We breed them together. We get the F1 hybrids, which is the first hybrid offspring. Normally, you'll get that hybrid vigor, and they'll represent 120 to 130%, okay, of their potential, which is far better than the parents, which is great, and it's an illusion, and it messes people up. Now, what would happen if you were to breed the offspring from that and breed them together? We don't drop down to the 100% that the parent stock we're at. We definitely don't maintain the 120 or 130% that we were hoping for. We actually can drop down as much as 80% to the 80% of their potential. The F2 second generation offspring will all of a sudden represent the 80% mark of the potential of those birds. And they're unpredictable. The birds are all over the mark. They're big, small. Their performance abilities are all over the place. Reproduction abilities are all over the place. They look terrible. There's so much genetic diversity, it's not even funny. And I saw that. I've talked about this before, where when I was a kid, my dad would get the Cornish cross and we'd butcher them for meat, a whole bunch of them. And I remember one time he says, why are we paying for these? Why don't we just raise a handful of these and we produce our own every year? And we did that. We took what we thought was the best rooster with a handful of the best hens. We bred them together. Oh my God, the offspring were terrible. They were all over the board. Some of them weren't even worth eating. They didn't grow. They didn't develop. We were wasting feed on them. We said, okay, no more of that. They obviously have the secret in a vault that we're not going to get, which is almost the truth, because they have their great-grandparent lines, which nobody sees. They have their grandparent lines, their parent lines, and then the consumer gets the product of that. Okay, so when you look at the hatchery, they're getting parent lines that are of one side and parent lines of another. They're doing their crosses there. But even them don't get the grandparent lines or the great-grandparent lines, which are hidden in a vault, basically.
And that was done for a reason.
Yeah.
Hatchery is a perfect example. 90% of your hatcheries will do the same thing.
So if you're, I don't know if I should say this or not, but if you want to produce really good hybrid offspring that you can sell. I'm starting a can of worms here, I'm telling you. And you want to do this right, and you want to protect some of that, what do they call it? The recumbent reciprocal selection has a lot to do with this.
That's it in a nutshell.
So you have two really protected lines that nobody gets. So you're always bringing them together. You're producing hybrid cross. You know what? I don't even have a problem with that. Only if you're honest to your customer of what you did. That I create these from my specialized lines. You're getting basically the hybrid crosses. Don't breed them. They're not meant to be bred. Okay, they have a purpose, whatever they are, but they're not meant to be bred. Hey, I don't have a problem with that. But that's what the commercial industry does. I mean, if you're in that business, that's what you should do, as long as you're honest with the final results are.
Breeders have done that for a century, and it's because they know when those birds go out that they sell, they'll never be able to reproduce them. They have no worries about anybody breeding those chickens. They would sell them, but people would say, I'm not getting the same back out of mine as the breeder's getting. And that's what he intended it for.
Yeah. Harp Acres, I don't know if he's a member. Do you know if he's a member or not?
I don't think so.
Because he comes up with some really good stuff. Effective use of hybrid vigor requires a crossing of unrelated parent breeds and is maximally expressed only in the first generation. That's exactly what I was talking here.
Only in the first generation.
Like Hard Acres was talking about, hybrid vigor only works the first time. We're not going to see this in the F2 generation. Every time you bring in new blood, you're not producing hybrid crosses anymore. You're actually mongrelizing. So understand that hybrid vigor can't be passed from generation to generation. It's more of an effect than a genetic inheritance. Matter of fact, a hybrid vigor, it's not an inheritable trait. Just like inbreeding depression isn't. You might think that you inbred your birds and screwed them up. The truth is that even those birds that are showing inbreeding depression, if you were to breed them to another bird, that inbreeding depression would not transmit to the offspring, actually, genetically. Like we were talking about a second ago, that when we start moving away from hybrid vigor is when we start breeding like what they call 3- and 4-way crosses. We're actually on our way to mongrelization. So when you're breeding two pure families together, that's what we call a good cross, a positive cross. We're getting the hybrid vigor we're looking for. They're bred for a specific purpose. Once we start bringing more birds into that, we start looking at what we call 3-way and 4-way crosses. We move away from hybrid vigor or hybrid crosses, and we're now into mongrelization. That's why I'm so against 3- and 4-way crosses. They don't create anything. They think that if they do a 3-way, 4-way cross and they retain the bloodline of those 3 birds, those 3 breeds, it doesn't work like that. Genes don't pass like that. We're back to talking about the heterozygous of impure genes, or we're talking about the homozygous of dominant genes.
There was a guy once I remember hearing that made a 12-way cross bird. And I forget how many years it took him to actually make this one bird. But I was telling other guys, I said, yeah, it took him all these years to make a 12-way cross. Why didn't he just set them as a family and spend all those years working on them as far as making them pure rather than cross?
He didn't make a 12-way cross. What he did, he just infused new blood to it every year, which is basically mongrel blood. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we're crossing the unrelated lines or breeds, what generates hybrid vigor? And it's generated by increasing heterozygosity instead of homozygosity, heterozygosity, and gene recombination. And just looking at those words, that says a lot, because when we're crossing contrasting characteristics, for one, we're recombinating the genes at the same time. That's what creates hybrid vigor. That also creates a lot of variety, a lot of genetic diversity. But here's another point, too, that I want to make real quick, is we talked about this a second ago, that hybrid vigor doesn't happen all the time, no matter what you're crossing. And we can see evidence of this, like in the commercial or say even the domestic chicken world, where you could do crosses. You could cross in the olden days, like in the 50s and stuff, they would cross, I think it was like Barred Rocks to like New Hampshires, and they would get a specific type of bird, which would be to them hybrid vigor. Look at that comparison to what they're doing now with the Cornish crosses. They're breeding like a white rock to a Cornish cock, okay? And look at the hybrid vigor they're getting from that, which is totally different than the hybrid vigor they're getting from the other birds. So just because you're putting 2 birds together, even though they're different breeds, even though they have contrasting characteristics and you're recombinating the genes, you're not always going to get the hybrid vigor you think you're going to get. It's not automatic. It doesn't happen with every cross.
That's another thing that's happened if somebody has actually just bred chickens for years. You've seen that as well many times. Just because you're putting them together and they're a totally different breed, you're not going to get that hybrid vigor, say, out of the next, you get less or more out of the next one that you would breed.
Yeah.
It was at different volumes that you were seeing.
So again, how do we improve hybrid vigor? Create 2 purebred families. We breed them together. If they're pure, the purer they are, the better hybrid vigor you're going to get. And if you can learn the system of recumbent reciprocal selection, I don't know why I can't talk today. I'm all tongue-tied.
That's a hard one anyway.
No, just in general, I've been like that all day today. It seems like I can't talk today. Some days I get like that. Then you have a chance of actually improving hybrid vigor. So how to get the best of both worlds? Try to get the hybrid vigor and the prepotency at the same time. Again, we're looking at the same things we were talking about before, purity of blood. So we're looking at inbred family. We're looking at a closed yard. We're being careful not to add any outside blood. Purity of characters. So we're selecting for characters that we're talking about that are homozygous dominant. Yes, they can be done with recessive homozygous genes, but then whether they're successful or not can depend on the bird that you breed them to. Select for homozygosity. That's what we're talking about. The characters that are homozygous dominant. Practice recumbent reciprocal selection, and you can get the best of both worlds by doing that. Okay, I'm actually, I'm at the end.
Yeah.
So we covered everything.
I didn't think we'd be able to cover that today, tell you the truth about it.
That's why I went so fast, and that's why I was stumbling over my words, because I really did want to cover this right.
Yeah.
A lot of times Nancy, and sometimes even Frank and I, will take these topics and we'll recover them inside the podcast. And we may. Nancy and I might talk about it. Again, we'll cover it in a different way. But when I have a really good topic that I really like, and I want to cover the whole thing, I tend to try to go too fast. I start stumbling over my words. I can't spit out certain words. It's just one of those things. So,
and two, normally when we have on the live shows, we've got a podcast or a video that we've done that we can refer them to go in more depth where we're hitting different stuff and it's all new. I'm sure sometime we're going to be covering it on down the road.
I think it's going to be one of those that we'll probably cover it again inside the Master's Class video series. Mm-hmm. But there, we can take our time. I don't mind taking my time there and going slower and covering it. And then we'll have some illustrations to show everybody. And if I have to, I'll break it up into different parts if I think it's that important. But we've been promising everybody this topic for a long time, for months. And I was like, you know what? I got to get this thing done.
And we go more depth too. We got it inside the website, man, we can go so much deeper with it. But get a hold of me and Kenny. If you guys want to hear on different topics, let us know. We'll put them all together and pick one out of a hat to do on the show.
Yeah, I'm always looking for, I have a whole list of things I can do.
We've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'll never run out of topics and everything. But if you come up with one, it's like, because sometimes they'll hit me like, that's a great idea. That'd be fun. I'm always looking for the fun.
The viewers, when they're psyched up art, that's something they want to hear, it makes for a better show too, because they're asking more questions. And I think it would it makes better shows when everybody's enjoying it.
It seems to be the really big topics like this one. We don't get as many questions. And I was talking to a couple members. They both said the same thing, is I want to ask questions, but I don't want to miss anything. So when I'm typing something, or sometimes it cuts the video out when I'm typing it, or I'm not paying attention, I don't want to miss anything. I don't know what to do about that, actually, because I understand it too. I have a number of shows I watch, not on chickens or anything, but more on the business side. And there's so many times I want to ask questions, but I don't, because I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. I don't want to have to go back and listen to the whole thing over again, that type of thing.
Or try to find it again, it's a problem.
No, it doesn't cut me out completely, but a lot of times when I'm typing something in, this may be happening here too, it cuts the sound out.
That's always been my problem, though, having to go back through the video and find out where you left off, where you blanked it out at. I usually don't look at the time that it's at because I'm listening to it. But yeah, I know that feeling.
So everybody, if this is something you guys want to re-listen to or whatever, or someone who needs to hear this, make sure they do it soon, because I don't plan on keeping it on YouTube very long. This will go into the archives on the website. If you like what you hear and you like the kind of information that we're providing, and it's much better on the website, I encourage you to join the Breeders Academy, and we can help you there. We can answer all your questions. We can do coaching calls. We'll be there for you there. Frank, I want to thank you again for joining me. You're the best co-host. This is so much fun. Like, we don't talk enough as it is. And Karen had to leave early, which made it a little tough, but I want to thank Karen for producing the show. She helps out quite a bit, takes my mind off a lot of things. And I want to thank the audience for joining us, because it's your questions and your participation that actually shapes the show. And I appreciate that. And we'll see you guys next week.
See you guys.
See you guys later.
Have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you again for joining us on the Bred to Perfection podcast show. This show was brought to you by the Breeders' Academy, where by becoming a member, you can increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and take you and your fowl to the next level.
We can also show you how to create a strain from hybrid crosses or mongrel flocks, and help you to create, maintain, and improve your present strains. We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel anytime.
To join us at the Breeders' Academy membership website, go to www.breedersacademy.com.
Best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
While you're checking out the Breeders' Academy, make sure to sign up for our newsletter, The Breeders' Bulletin. We provide a lot of free bonus materials and some great information that will take you and your fowl to the next level. Well, that's it for now.
We hope you join us next time for another episode of Bred to Perfection. We'll see you later.
Bye.